Welcome to another podcast of Byte Ventures. Here with us, we have Alan Stein. He has been a great person. We'll talk about that. But currently, he is the CEO and the Chief Accelerator of Kadima Careers, if I pronounce that right. And he has been helping software engineers to get better and to land into good software engineering roles. So that's had been the primary focus. And he has some amazing work experience, starting from like Facebook, Salesforce, Tableau, and all stuff. So we'll talk about that. So welcome, Alan, and thank you for joining. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Thanks, Sitesh, for having me. Just briefly about my background. I had a 25 plus year career. I've worked at 21 companies. I've held 29 jobs. I've worked for 38 bosses. And now I'm done working for other people. Now I help individuals, ambitious professionals land jobs at the world's best companies, the FAANGs, the Magnificent Seven, top tech companies in the world. And I do work with software engineers, but also product managers, customer success, sales, operations, finance, really helping ambitious professionals get more interviews, turn those interviews into offers. And then when they get the offers, negotiate for what they deserve or what they're worth. So that's a little bit about me. And I'm based in Brooklyn, New York, but our clientele is all over the world.
Awesome. That's so great. And welcome again to the show.
Thanks.
All right, let's go in. So it's very interesting about your career that I marked is you did a PhD in clinical psychology and then you transitioned into tech. So what happened? What changed that?
So I'm a PhD dropout. So I do indicate that on LinkedIn. So I was going for a PhD in clinical psychology. I'm a big fan of psychology. I find it very interesting. And so when I was in undergraduate, I majored in psychology. It was interesting. I did well at it. It makes a lot of sense to me. And then at that stage in my life, like I asked some professors and some mentors, what do you do with a psych degree? And they're like, get a PhD in psychology and clinical psych. That's like the most ambitious thing to do. So I was like, fine, I'll do that. So then I pursued a path towards that. And then after I got into a program where they gave me a full ride and tuition was fully covered, it was a good program at University of Delaware. After a semester, I realized that it was not my cup of tea. So that was my first career pivot back in 1995 when I dropped out of the PhD program in clinical psych.
I think it must be a big thing back then, right? Like dropping out of college was not a great thing. And I think you had to take a tremendous courage to like do that. What do you think about that?
So I did finish college. I finished my undergrad I got a BA in psychology, and then I was going for a PhD. And then the PhD was going to be a 5 to 7 year program, depending on how quickly I would finish it. And after a semester, I was like, I don't have the desire to follow through with this. So I walked into my professor's office and I told her name was Julie. The news, she was disappointed, but she understood that I just didn't have the passion. And if you don't have the passion to pursue a PhD, which is a very time consuming, very rigorous program, it's better to cut your losses when you know that that is the answer.
Yeah, I think that's pretty interesting. And I have been also very interested about psychology in general. So when I was doing my master's, I was looking for a lot of degrees where there's an integration of psychology with computer science. I was looking into that, but everyone was suggesting that, okay, there is not a lot of master's options for that. You have to go for PhD. And then I was in the same boat. I was like, I don't know if I'm ready for a 5 years dedicated journey because I don't know what am I inside because I might not like it. And being an international student, it was pretty hard because the choice is tied up with the immigration things and all stuff. So that makes a lot of difficult issues. So, but great job. And see, you are in the tech side as like us.
Yeah.
Okay. So coming back to a career, you have some amazing work experience across like Google, Facebook, Tableau, Salesforce, and a bunch of other companies. So what are the little things that you look forward to when you were in the one position and a little cultural thing that stick with you after you left each company?
The things that I really looked forward to in those roles is I was solving interesting problems. I was working with good people, smart people, collaborative people. I was getting paid well. That was very nice. At most of those companies, at some of the companies later in my career at Google and Facebook, I was also fed really well. They feed their employees quite well. And and I was always not always, but I was often challenged and also given lots of resources to grow and build my teams, grow and develop people. I really took a strong passion in growing and developing careers. And that probably led me on my path to what I'm doing at Kadima Careers now, where we accelerate careers.
Okay. So yeah, that's an interesting point. Moving back to Kadima Careers, why don't you talk a little bit more about what it does, how you find people, how you make them grow to different roles, and all stuff.
Yeah. So Kadima Careers, we help ambitious professionals land better jobs quickly, confidently, and with lots more money. So that's what we do. If people have a desire to get a better job at top companies, we help them do that. We empower them to do that. The way we find them is they usually find us. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn, both inbound
Okay.
and outbound, reaching out to people. And I do lots of talks at lots of top schools at Columbia, MIT, University of
Mm-hmm.
Chicago, Wharton, lots of schools like that. So people find out about me from there. And yeah, and then guesting on podcasts like this or talks like this. And also, I've done lots of
Yeah.
collaboration with other really top notch individuals out there in the space who really are here to help lift the community and lift individuals up and to take a proactive control of their career. So I'm really, I've learned throughout my career that you can either let your career happen to you or you can
Mm-hmm.
choose to own your career and choose a path that you want to take. And you can't always definitively land that path, but at least if you have a goal in mind, you're much more likely to achieve that goal or close to that goal rather than just letting circumstances happen to you.
Awesome. Let's take a step back. What made you start Kadima Careers?
Uh, Getting fired for the fifth time. So
Oh
I
my God.
I've had 29 jobs. I've gotten fired from five of them. 24 of them I left on my own. And I started to see a pattern of I might not be best fit for working in the corporate world. I got fired for different reasons for those five different jobs, but I got tired of getting fired. More so my wife did because it was much more stressful for her. I kind of the first couple of times I got fired, it was a little stressful, and then I kind of got used to it. So I was tired of getting fired, and then also I don't know if you've heard this term ikigai. It's a Japanese
Yeah.
term for like the reason of living. And I read about this concept. It was during COVID lockdown, during lots of time to be at home with my family thinking. And ikigai is the Japanese term for like reason for living. And it's basically the concentric overlap of four circles. If you think about like a Venn diagram, where one diagram is what you are good at, and I happen to be really good at getting jobs and helping other people get jobs. What you enjoy doing. I just geek out about this stuff. I take interviews sometimes just for fun. I actually enjoy interviews. Actually, being on the interview side, not conducting interviews, but being interviewed. I actually enjoy that. A lot of people don't.
Okay.
Third is what the world needs. So people need jobs. People need to understand how to get good jobs, and then what the world will pay for, what people will pay for. And if we can help people get $37,000, $100,000, $200,000 more money at top companies, people will pay. So the combination of getting tired of being fired and also seeing where my passion lied and that there was a business for this. And I started as a side hustle while I was still at Salesforce to kind of test the waters to see if there was product market fit before going all
Mm-hmm.
in on Kadima.
Oh, awesome. That's great. I think you explained a very important thing like the Ikigai. And I think that is one of the reasons people are happy with what they do and they try to be focused on their life's vision, right? They want to like do, okay, this is what I want to do in my future and stuff like that. So what exactly Kadima means, if you can just focus on that a little bit?
That's a great question. So Kadima means forward. So it's a Hebrew word for forward. So when I was thinking about the name of the company, I was having martinis with a buddy of mine who happens to be Israeli, and I'm Jewish.
Mm-hmm.
He's Israeli. I'm not that religious. I don't speak Hebrew, but my friend David did. And when I was telling him about the concept and I said, how do you say accelerate in Hebrew? I forget what that word is. But then he's like, well, Kadima means forward. And I know that name from childhood. There was like a game, you can look at the paddle up here,
Yeah,
right
yeah.
there. It's a paddle. It used to be a beach game called Pro Kadima, but we got the trademark
Okay.
for the word Kadima Careers as business services. So it's basically like forwarding careers, accelerating your career.
Oh, that's awesome. I didn't think about that, but you have put a lot of thought into that. Awesome. Okay. Coming back, you have been at leadership positions at all these different companies, and you are being a leader or a CEO at your Kadima Careers, right? Uh, what exactly do you think is the difference between these two positions?
Between being a CEO and past roles, it's a hell
Yeah.
of a lot harder. I'm working harder than I've ever worked. I'm working more hours than I've ever worked. I'm on call all the time. The entrepreneurship is, there's lots of good things about it, but when stuff hits a fan, when shit hits a fan, it's up to me. I'm always on call. Like we do have a team now, and I am able to take vacations now, which is lovely, but I am still busting my hump every day. But I also can have more control over the situation, not control over everything. But when stupid things are done, like we had an issue earlier today with poor communication between our team. And I was like, well, that's easily solved. Just reach out to me whenever you have a question. Don't go through all these layers, which is kind of a ridiculous hierarchy thing that just naturally creeps into organizations. We can squash that. I have that power to squash that. So there's lots of benefits in it, but there are lots of benefits of working in the corporate world as well. And uh, I would not have eliminated that time in my career.
Yeah, I think there's a natural progression sometimes. You see how the world works, and then you take out the best parts, and then start a company kind of that,
Yeah,
right?
and I've been very
If that
fortunate.
makes
So
sense.
I've worked at some of the best companies in the world. Like I've learned about OKRs and really launching and iterating from Google. I've learned about lots of the
Hmm.
key attributes at Facebook that I'm taking here. I've learned things from Salesforce, from American Express about how they market and segment their customers. Tableau. So I've learned a lot of this stuff along the way. I also worked in finance. I worked in minor league baseball. I worked in venture capital. I've taken all those learnings and applying it here. And plus, I got an MBA. So I probably learned the least from the MBA compared to the real life experience that I had in those 21 companies.
I think that's amazing. You have done like almost touched every aspect of what a tech person can do. So that's very
And
interesting.
yeah, and my whole
Okay,
career has
coming
not been in
back.
tech. I also worked for Kraft. I worked in baseball, like I said. I worked in finance. So it hasn't all been tech.
Yeah, I think you're like a cosmopolitan guy with the hands and everywhere, right? Okay, pretty interesting. Okay, coming back to you said it's pretty hard as a CEO, right? So how do you schedule your time so that you are at optimum performance at every single day?
That's a great question. I'm still working on it. So I'm still probably working 10 to like probably 12 to 17-hour days on most weekdays,
17
12 to
hours?
17 hours a day. Like
Oh my
I'm up in the
gosh.
morning at 5:30, checking my emails, seeing what's going on, checking LinkedIn, and until I go to sleep. Like there are times I take time off to spend time with my family and friends and so forth. But when those things don't get in the way, I'm focused on the business. Um, and I am trying to get better structure into my life, and I am trying to schedule my schedule from like 10 to 6 during the day, and I'm trying to get out to
Mhm.
walk. Like I like to walk and listen to audiobooks or podcasts, and I try to do that at least once a day to keep myself sane. And I do some cardio as well to try to keep sane, essentially.
Okay, cool. That's interesting. One thing I always wanted to ask someone who has done a degree in psychology is what exactly are you still applying from those concepts of
So
psychology?
there's a great book behind me. It's blurry back there, but it's this book called Influence by Dr. Robert Cialdini. I don't know if you've heard of that. I think he's a psychologist or
Yeah, it's a thick
yeah, it's a
book,
big thick
right?
book. Right here.
Oh yeah,
I
I do
actually
have
got a
it.
note from him because I was able to influence him and I got him to mail
Oh,
this to me. Um, but
awesome.
there's a lot of psychology in here about the 7 different ways that you can influence people. And one of them is reciprocity. One of them is by liking. I forget how you and I engaged initially on LinkedIn to get on your podcast or your show here, but you use some influencing skills to get me to respond to you because I get lots of DMs. And something you said was
Okay.
interesting enough to influence me. I think I don't know, I can go back and check it out. But psychology
No, you should not.
is probably good. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here now. But there's only so much in life that we can control ourselves, and then a lot of it is influence or yeah, influencing essentially. So then, what methods do you use to influence without authority? And that's a term that we used to use at Amex all the time. Managers, as leaders, you have to influence without authority. And if I can't control you physically or economically, what sort of tactics can I take to influence you to do what I need you to do? So that's all psychology. It's incentives as well, but incentives are essentially psychology. All the experiments where they would give like a rat a pellet for doing something. Those are
Hmm.
psychological
Yep.
experiments of incentivizing like a rat or a human being to do something. So psychology is extremely powerful of how people make decisions.
Yeah. I think I have been reading a couple of books. The latest one I'm reading is The Indestructible by
Oh,
Nirayal. I don't know if you have heard about it.
Indistractable. Yeah, I've listened to some of his podcasts, and I'm too distracted to listen to the book. But I like a lot of his methods. I've heard him on a couple of podcasts near IL. Yeah,
Yeah. I think the way of speaking, and he actually hits the nail so hard. So it's like it's right to the point and all stuff. And there was another book called
oh
Thinking
yeah, by
Fast and
Danny
Slow by
Kahneman.
Daniel
Yeah,
Kahneman. Yeah. So I think that was too heavy for me. I didn't complete it, but it was interesting to know a lot of the biases that humans act on, work on, so
yeah.
stuff like that. So do you have any recommendations
Well,
of anything?
Influence is a great book. Um, Another great
Mm-hmm.
book, Dale Carnegie's book, How to Win Friends, or How to Win Friends and Influence People, or How to Influence People and Win Friends. I forget what it is. That,
I think
that's
the
a
first
great
one.
book. Um, there, like I'm really into psychology and how our minds will subvert us from making right decisions. From the recency effect, I'm reading this book, Decisive, by Chip and Dan Heath. It was actually recommended by Ethan Evans from Amazon. I don't know if you follow him.
Okay.
It's a great book
Yeah.
about like how to eliminate a lot of biases in our decision making process to make the right decisions rather than the wrong decisions where our head will take us sometimes. So I have a whole bunch of. There's another great book, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck by I think that's by Mark
Yeah.
Mason. I think his name is about
Mark
how
Mason.
you
Yeah.
have to let
I
things
think yeah.
roll off yourself and like not. It's really very powerful about how circumstances exist and then our thoughts about those circumstances impact our feelings and then those feelings impact our actions and those actions impact our results. So if you can get inside your head and subvert your head going into a very bad dark place and instead reframe it,
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot more positive that you can achieve.
Cool. That's a very interesting thought. So like, I think psychology is everywhere, right? Wherever you work, think, want to work on something, I think psychology
Yeah,
is everywhere. So okay, I'll ask a hard question. So how important do you think is a person's school in their life?
that's a great question. And my so I have 3 kids. Two of my boys are twins. They just went to school. We just dropped them off in college. And I'm assuming you're talking university or undergrad or
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
So for people,
University,
So
right?
for people in my situation, my wife's a doctor. I'm successful as an entrepreneur. We have decent. We've saved up decent amount of money. Our kids have grown up in a safe neighborhood. They're white boys. There's a lot going for them. The school is not going to actually change all that much of their outcome. For if we had a very different situation, their school would matter a lot more. So our kids applied to lots of different schools. One of my sons applied to 16, one applied to 12, and they got into two great schools. And they will be very successful at those schools. But they would have been like, and like Lucas, my son, got into his number one choice, which was Emory, and Jonah got into his number three choice,
Oh,
which was Duke. And even if they got into their 16th and
awesome.
12th choice, they would be totally fine. So it's important for some people, and there's lots of research out there that's important for some people. But I went to
Hmm.
school undergrad at Binghamton University. You probably haven't heard of it. It's a small school upstate New
Yeah,
York.
I've
Okay,
I've
maybe
heard
you have.
about
Like
it.
it's a good value school. It's a and my kids both
Yeah.
applied there. They both, well, one got in, one retracted his application because he got in early to Emory. They would have been fine going to Binghamton,
Okay.
a hell of a lot cheaper, which is a great school, by the way, but it's not like one son's going to Duke and one's going to Emory. So Duke and Emory
Hmm.
are, depending on what list you look at, the 24th best school in the country and the like 40th best school in the country or whatever. And you can argue that whatever the numbers are, they will be. So, in answer to your question, for people in my socioeconomic situation, it matters very little. For some individuals, it
Okay.
could be life changing to get into a Duke or Emory or Harvard or
Okay. That's
Stanford.
awesome.
And, and,
Or
or
MIT.
what? Or
Or
yeah,
MIT.
MIT. Like that was one of the schools. Like my son Jonah got rejected from MIT and Stanford and Carnegie Mellon, and he wound up going to Duke. Not too shabby,
Okay.
but he's gotten rejected from some of the best schools in the world.
That's okay. I think he'll still do great. He has an amazing
They'll
dad.
be fine because they were
Yeah.
fortunate enough to be born in a country that gives them a lot of opportunity to be born white, which gives you advantages,
Yeah.
to be male, which gives you advantages, to be able to speak English,
Hmm.
which gives you advantages, and to have
Hmm.
good socioeconomic support from their parents and their grandparents. So it matters more for people that came in with less than in our situation.
Yeah, I think yeah, very valid point. I think a lot of things start to click in when you're around a certain atmosphere, a certain surrounding, and it matters a lot more for the growth of the individual, right? It's like who surrounds you, what are the good things that you do, and
Yeah,
stuff
but
like
I
that.
can tell you that me, like going undergrad to Binghamton, the opportunities afforded me were less. I could have tried to figure it out, but the companies I worked at before I went to Binghamton undergrad and then I got my MBA 10 years later at
Hmm.
Columbia Business School, one of the top seven business schools in the world. They call themselves a Magnificent
Yep.
Seven: Harvard, MIT, Stanford, Chicago, Kellogg, Wharton, Columbia, and one other. Um, but that helped me a lot because top companies came to recruit at Columbia. And when I got into American Express after Columbia, it was because American Express recruited at Columbia and they liked Columbia talent. And when I went from American Express to
Yeah.
Google, Google liked the fact that I had Columbia on my resume. Like when they did the org announcement, they didn't say that I came from American Express and Binghamton. They said I came from American Express and Columbia.
Yeah, I think school does play an important role if you are in a little bit unfortunate situation, but in most cases, I think it's up to you. You have to derive the values from wherever
Yeah.
you are.
And by the way, I got into Google coincidentally from a referral who happened to go to Binghamton. So that, but
Okay.
I think that got my referral in, my name in because of that connection. But I think as I proceeded, like my boss who hired me was another Columbia Business School alum. So I think that. led
Okay.
to Anand was his name, being more positive predisposed to me.
Cool. I think life became full circle for you. Okay, interesting. Coming back to last couple of questions. First is there is a lot of companies which are focusing on hiring talent and posting them to the right places. How is Kadima different from all of that, or what's the USP?
So, what we do is we're a career accelerator. We help empower people to accelerate their career. So, we work with people to like hone in on the target companies that they should be focusing on, then hone in on the right sort of roles that play to their strength. Because you got to think about from the hiring manager's perspective, if you're a software engineer but you want to go into sales, no one's going to hire you as a salesperson if all you've done has been a SWE or SDE in your past. Unless you build relationships,
Mm-hmm.
there's ways to do that. And then we help people build the outreach because that's how people get jobs. 24 out of my 29 jobs in my career have I've only been considered because someone was kind enough to say, "Hey, Alan's a decent guy. You should consider him." Then you have to prepare for the interviews. It's not like it was handed to me. Although in two cases it was handed to me because of nepotism. One time my dad hired me, one time my Aunt Sammy hired me. But outside of nepotism,
Okay.
usually you have to interview. And then, so we help people interview. We help people with the mindset also because a job search is damn hard and you get rejected and you get ghosted and you get turned down for jobs that you're perfectly qualified for. So we work a lot on the psychology as well about continuing to plow through and not taking rejection as failure,
Mm-hmm.
but rather taking that failure and learning from that and continuing to forge ahead. So we take a holistic approach and we work with people to get more interviews, convert those interviews into more offers, and then once they get those offers, to negotiate using a lot of psychology and also some negotiation tactics.
Awesome. So that brings us to last question of this podcast, which is you have been writing a lot of stuff on LinkedIn, a lot of career advices and all stuff. If you can summarize and just let out three important things that any person should focus on, uh, who they want to like upskill or whatever they want to do, what would the three things be?
So the three things: first, relationships. Invest in relationships. Um, Secondly, be proactive. Think about what you want. Don't let things come to you. Spend a little time and be thoughtful about what you want. And third, kind of aligned with the second one, own your career. No one is going to care as much about your career as you will. So if you want, like, you can let things happen to you, or you can choose to own those
Mm-hmm.
choices. And you may not get all of those options that you want, but it's a hell of a lot better for you to choose a path that you want to take rather than wait for your boss or your company or some recruiter or somebody else to decide your fate.
Awesome, great advices, and thank you so much, Alan, for joining me today out of your busy schedule. And I hope you liked it. Probably we'll chat later as well, sometimes on a different problem statements on what you're working on, what are the different challenges. But that's for the next episode. But thank
Yeah,
you so much for
Satish,
joining.
thank you so much for inviting me on here, reaching out to me on LinkedIn, and appreciate all you're doing.